Commerce Board of Directors.
Okay, there we go. If everybody could take their seats, we'll get this party started. If you haven't found your table, grab your coffee, grab your tea, and find your seat, please. All right, I see people are in the process of finding their seats. So in order to try to keep this on track, I'm going to go ahead and start.
How's it going? John Gary, good to see you again. Yeah. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Austin Chamber's annual Economic Outlook as we look ahead to 2023. We've got a packed agenda today. Starting off, we're going to hear from Dr. Mark Dotzer. He will share his economic insights as someone who spent 18 years as chief economist of the Texas A&M University Real Estate Center. Following Dr. Dotzer, we're honored to be joined today by our state comptroller, Glenn Hagar, who we call him Landslide Glenn. He had the highest percentage of votes of all of our statewide officials. Later, we'll finish the program with a panel discussion moderated by John Garrett, CEO and founder of Community Impact. The Chamber staff has actually been crowdsourcing questions via social media, and the questions that we received through that will largely guide our panel's discussion here as we complete our lunch. Before our program, though, I want to recognize the partners and sponsors that make events like today possible. We're especially grateful for our panel sponsor, PIMCO. If you want to hold your applause to the end of the list of sponsors, you may, but nobody ever seems to do that, so I'll let your conscience be your guide. Big thank you to our media partner, Community Impact, and John will be leading that panel. As well as today's corporate sponsors who are listed on our screens, and our supporting sponsors, also listed on the screen. Thank you to our generous 2022 pivotal partners, Amazon, get their logo up there, Ascension Seton, Dell Technologies, again PIMCO, and Wells Fargo. Applause. Thanks also to our 2022 foundation partners listed on the screen, and also to our corporate partners listed on the screen as well. These are the companies that help the Chamber provide exemplary programming throughout the year, and we thank them for their generous support. More applause. You guys are getting this, okay. And I haven't been handed the list. Yes, you have. Okay, here comes the list. Oh, good, I don't have to put my glasses back on. I want to say a special thanks to our elected officials who have joined us. And as I read out the names, if you'll stand and be recognized, please. Staff from the office of U.S. Senator John Cornyn. Jill is in the room. Jill, if you would stand. Also, Brandon from... you can't hold your applause till I list these folks. From the office of U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, if Brandon will stand. And I think we have staff members here from the office of Congressman Michael McCall. Our state representatives, I saw State Representative Donna Howard looking for a seat right here in the front. State Representative Gina Hinojosa is here with us today. State Representative Vicki Goodwin, I believe, is here. And then Peter Einhorn from the office of State Senator Sarah Eckhart, and our council member Paige Ellis is here, and last but not least, Bruce Elfont, our Travis County tax assessor collector, whose name will get a lot of attention in the next couple months. So if y'all would stand and be recognized, let's thank our public officials. The Austin Chamber's vision is for the Austin region, our metro region, to have the most prosperous business community in the country. In partnership with Opportunity Austin, we are working hard towards that goal every day. In fact, this partnership with Opportunity Austin has created more than 500,000 jobs for our region since 2004. It does more than create prosperity for the business community. It also helps build community prosperity. The job opportunities that we help create give our citizens the opportunity to find meaningful work, pay their bills, and provide for their families. It results in a better quality of life for the entire region, and it helps bring more capital investment into our economy and greater global connectivity for our region. Each year, we enjoy gathering with community and corporate leaders to discuss trends and issues affecting our region's growth. And therefore, we're excited to have an economic expert with us today to give us his perspective. As many of you know, I'm an Aggie, so I'm especially excited to have someone of the distinguished reputation of Dr. Mark Dotzer, who's connected with Texas A&M University. As I mentioned earlier, he spent 18 years as the chief economist of the Texas A&M University Real Estate Center in College Station, also known as God's Country. A little editorial there. In 2015, Dr. Dotzer stepped down from his position at the Real Estate Center to focus all of his time and effort on analyzing current economic conditions and communicating his analysis with others. Please help me welcome Dr. Mark Dotzer.
Can we get the lavalier mic on? Check. 1, 2. Hello. Almost there. We're getting close. I can hear it. Hey, it's great to be here with you today. I was just looking. I've been doing this now. I looked last night just for fun. The first presentation I made in Austin was in 1999. Since then, I've done 66 presentations in this town. So this is number 67, and it's a pleasure to be with you here. I lived here from 1981 to 1987. I did work at A&M for a long time. I got my PhD here in Austin. So I swing from all fences, like hook 'em, gig 'em, and sick 'em. My daughter went to Baylor, so I do it all that way. Just want to say thank you to the Chamber for inviting me to be a part of the program. A lot of you have not heard me speak before, so let me just say I don't do Zig Ziglar, power positive thinking, let's put some lipstick on a pig and sell something kind of speech. And I don't have any self-esteem, so I frankly don't care if you do either by the time we're done here. It's not a pep rally. It's not a political rally. I might as well get that disclaimer out too. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I can't stand politics. I do talk about federal policy because you can't talk about economic and business decisions without talking about federal policy. If your person was responsible for that mistake, that's your fault. If my person is responsible for that mistake, it's my fault. So let's just get over that. There's no pep rally here. It's nothing but business. We're talking business here. That's all I'm interested in. So with that said, let me get started. A lot of you in this room are young enough to know the band Imagine Dragons and the song Radioactive. And as I was listening to that while I was washing dishes during COVID, my wife and I had a great partnership. She's a good cook and I'm a good eater. And the only thing I could bring to the partnership was washing dishes. And so I listened to loud music and I got acquainted with this song. And it's like, I'm radioactive. Oh, I need to watch out for this. At age 68, there's nothing worse than an old guy taking a tumble on a stage, so I won't do that. So anyhow, when the singer said, I'm breathing in the chemicals, and they took a really deep breath, and I actually tried to do that back in January in Dallas and choked myself. It took me about 2 minutes to stop coughing, so I won't do that again. Breathing in the chemicals. And I thought I had to stop washing dishes and go to my office and write a bullet list of what I saw chemicals in the economy, because I was feeling pretty weird way back in January. We've got tectonic experiments going on. If you feel like you're a little confused about what's going on right now, that means you are on top of your game. Because I have clients in every part of the real estate world, whether it's construction or engineering or law or brokerage or private equity, all of it. And the more experience that you have in the business, the more confused you are right now. And so don't feel bad about that. I don't know everything. I'm an economist. That means there's a 50% chance everything I say is wrong, all right? So that's just part of the job that we deal with. But this is, if you feel like there's a lot of stuff going on, there is. Because every one of these tectonic experiences can have a good outcome and a bad outcome. And the ones that usually come from the federal government have bad outcomes for the most part. The big thing right now is we have massive monetary policy and fiscal policy at the same time. I don't know why. Nobody can explain to me why the Federal Reserve left the 30-year fixed rate mortgage at 275 all of last year when home prices were going up 20% a year. That is an unfathomable answer. That's called a major policy error. In addition to that, we had fiscal policy going on. We had one president, Mr. Trump, add $1 billion in for COVID. I get it, it was creepy times. I was giving speeches right when COVID happened. And at that time, my theme was the whole creation is groaning. Nobody knew anything about anything. So what's a government policy response? The only thing the federal government can do efficiently is to give away other people's money. So they gave away $1 trillion to businesses and people. Okay, that's fine. I can understand that. And then the next president comes along and gives away another $2 or $3 trillion. And all of a sudden we have mortgage rates at 2 3/4 with $3 trillion of fresh money rolling through the system. That's another policy error. 2 policy errors right in a row. We're defunding the oil and gas business. It's not sexy to say that you're in favor of carbon production of any kind. I totally get that. Joe Biden didn't defund the oil and gas. Donald Trump didn't. Wall Street did. That goes back to 2018 or so when Wall Street said, y'all in the oil and gas business, you're not giving enough money back to investors and shareholders. We're not giving you a dime anymore. So we are in a position now where we're short energy worldwide. We're not building any pipelines, so we can't add to production. And so we're going to be short energy going forward. In addition to that, we have an unprecedented labor shortage. I travel a lot. I don't fly anymore because I got tired of sitting in a 22-inch seat and spending the night in an airport because the planes got canceled. I just don't need that anymore. I don't speak. If I can't drive, I don't do it anymore. This labor shortage is in every city, big and little, in every state in the country. And part of the reason for that is because Republicans, when they're in office, and Democrats, when they are in office, refuse to address a legal immigration system. It's disappointing each time we get a new president. I naively have a hope maybe they'll do something about it this time, but unfortunately, I've come to the conclusion that neither party is interested in creating a legal immigration system because that's how they get votes. So in my mind, this labor shortage is going to be kind of permanent too. Having a 50-foot wall doesn't solve a labor shortage. And allowing people to come in without documentation and not knowing where they're going, that doesn't solve immigration either. It's like maybe some year you'll find people in Washington coming together in a think tank, working out the ideas and coming up with a legitimate legal immigration situation where people don't have to be afraid, they're documented, they can participate in society, hold their head high, and contribute to the American dream. That's what I keep hoping for, and these politicians in Washington, D.C. just keep letting me down every year. If they continue to do that, like I think they will, that means we're going to have a permanent labor shortage too. And why am I saying that? Because inflation is the big issue in this country. And when labor is short, wages go up a lot. And when wages go up, everything goes up. China's in a secular decline. That's going to be good for America. China's star as an economic power is sinking faster than a meteor. Their days as a global economic power are over. They've chosen, China has never been a trade partner with America. They've been a reliable, low-cost subcontractor for America. And they've done a good job of that up until COVID, and all of a sudden they've become an unreliable, low-cost subcontractor for America. But when COVID is over, wherever that takes over there, their deal isn't going to be over anytime soon, because all of us in this room have had enough customer relations management to understand it's not a good idea to have your largest customer think you're their enemy. And the whole Western world views China as their enemy now, and the suppliers are moving out of there as fast as they possibly can. And a lot of that is going to come back to North America, whether that's Canada, the US, or Mexico. And that's going to be good for the old NAFTA corridor. If you're young enough, you don't know what the NAFTA corridor is, it'd be worth it to look that up, because jobs are going to flow away from China as fast as they can, and they're going to end up back in North America, and that's going to be good for distribution all along the NAFTA pipeline through Texas in a variety of ways. Working from home, nobody could see that one. I think things are getting better now. I understand from Castle Systems that people are showing up in the office on Wednesday now. So that's okay. That's good. All right, maybe Tuesday and Thursday a little bit. Forget it on Friday. And what the deal is about that is, what does that do for all the little retailers that are on the ground floor that were expecting customers to come in Monday through Friday, and now they're coming in 1 or 2 days a week? It's going to be really hard on those little retailers. One of my customers, one of my clients, is the Texas Appraisal Districts Association. And if I were with them this year, I'd say, good luck estimating the value of office buildings right now, because the value of an office building in America is unknown right at this point, because you don't have a clue how much demand that you're going to have for your space going forward. Changing community policing strategies. I'm going to get into that a little bit. We are in the midst of a massive migration of people throughout America. And just in case you're getting drowsy, I'll just give you a partial conclusion right at this point. And that is, whatever the population trend has been for Austin and Dallas and San Antonio and Houston and along the NAFTA corridor, whatever that population trend has been for the last 20 years was higher than the population trend for the previous 20 years. And it's, in my opinion, it's going to be higher over the next 20 years. And it has nothing to do with the Sun Belt, one of our trade secrets for economic development. I shouldn't give this away right before our panel, but we have the best Mexican food on earth. So that's another thing. But the other issue is there are just places in America where it's not much fun to live anymore. And so those people are moving to Texas as well as other places. And then finally, the Fed was going to raise long and short-term interest rates at the first of the year. This is why I was really feeling pretty bad at the first of the year, because conventional wisdom was the Fed is going to raise interest rates 3 times, 1/4%. And I was going out and talking to audiences like, this is not even close to what's going to happen here. And I feel better now because I do today, because we've raised interest rates a lot. They've signaled they're going to keep raising for a while. And once in a blue moon, we get this drift like the Fed's going to pivot and the stock market goes up 1,200 points in a day or two. And that's called wishful thinking. So anyhow, these are the major issues that's causing consternation among businessmen and women and investors, and that we have to sort through to come up with decent conjectures about business decisions. That's why I'm here today, really, is I hope I can give you some information that will help you make good business decisions for your business and also for your family and also for people that might be relying on you for some guidance. So let me talk about inflation. I basically got 2 topics because we're going to have a Q&A panel later on. We can talk about other things then. But this inflation issue is the top of mind. The problem with our country is it's way too strong. There's 10.5 million jobs open, and there's only like 5 million people looking for work. Wages are going up. Household net worth. Here's another policy error that was made by the Fed. By keeping interest rates at 0 for 10 years, it allowed wealthy people to get way wealthier. And what you see there in the little box there, net worth increased $40 trillion in 24 months. That's pretty good. If you own stocks and bonds and real estate, you're good. But unfortunately, a lot of the country doesn't own stocks and bonds and real estate, and they didn't participate in any of this. And they've been getting, a cop, firefighter, and teachers been getting 2-3% pay raises. This explains to me why I never thought I would see the day that a person could say, I am a socialist and I'm running for president, and be a viable candidate. This chart right here explains that. When you're not participating in the American dream and enough people don't participate, they get grumpy after a while. And when enough people get grumpy, they fire the politicians that are working for them, or they overthrow their government, one of those two. This is a policy decision that was made by the Fed to keep interest rates low for a decade, even though houses were going through the roof, even though Bitcoin went to $78,000 or whatever it was. If you think investing in crypto is a real thing, it is not an investment. Crypto is a gamble, all right? You can gamble. And I've met people, I've had people in Q&A come up to me and go, I made a bunch in crypto. It's like, well, of course you can. You can get lucky when you're gambling. Here's how I knew it was gambling. I wouldn't want to even talk about it until enough people asked me in Q&A. I figured I got to have some answers. And so I asked probably 100 people, what makes Bitcoin go up? I don't know. What makes Bitcoin go down? I don't know that either. Who invented Bitcoin in the first place? That's unknown as well. Okay? That's called gambling. Period. It's not investing. So just get over that. If you're under 40 and you think you're, or worse yet, if you're 50 and you're managing somebody's pension fund and you've made an allocation to a basket of crypto, I would sure like to know that and get my money out of your pension fund as fast as I could. This is the other policy error. This is tough when you're Jay Powell and you're trying to get inflation under control. I've never used this slide before. I've done 1,900 of these presentations. I've used this in probably 8, the last 8. This is the amount of money in your checking account. That trend, you want to know what that trend is? It's called a hockey stick. It went from $1 trillion to $4 trillion. This is all that government fiscal stimulus that went out and nobody needed it. And so to try to put, do you know what Americans do if they've got money? They spend it. That would be right. That's our global competitive advantage. Nobody can outspend an American. If you've got money, you know what to do with it. Back in the deep recessions, I would look at a group of people and say, look, it's your job. It's your patriotic duty. Go to the mall and buy something. You know what I'm saying? They can't do anything about that. The Federal Reserve can't control money in your checking account. That's called confiscation of personal property. And so that's got to burn its way through the system. How many of you in this room have heard of quiet quitting? Really, I'd like to see. It's getting more by the week. It's weird. 2 months ago, almost nobody. Quiet quitting, if you haven't heard that, just means I'm working for you and I'm doing the bare minimum to not get fired. And that's measured in productivity. And productivity is measured by the federal government, and productivity is starting to decline. And so I don't think I have this slide. No, I don't. Ernst & Young, or one of those other major accounting firm, consulting firm kind of outfits, they did a survey and found like 1/3 of the people were engaged at work. Are you engaged, kind of engaged, not engaged? 1/3 of them were engaged. The other 2/3 were either not engaged or slightly engaged. That's inflationary. When I'm having to pay you a lot of money to come to work and you're not doing anything, that means I have to raise my prices to get any kind of profit out of my organization. This inflation thing is not going to go away anytime soon. The whole idea at the first year, we're going to have 3 rate hikes, and then we're going to have a soft landing. That was horse feathers from day one. Okay, I've already talked about China. We don't need to go to there. So here's Jay Powell, chairman of the Fed. Superman, it was documented back in the 1950s, is stronger than a steaming locomotive. It was right on the TV show every time he came on. Superman is stronger than a steaming locomotive. That locomotive is inflation. And in America, we want a little inflation, 2%. That train, we want it going 45 miles an hour. The problem is it's going 55 and it's accelerating. And there's only one man. He happens to be a man this time. Could be a woman. Next time might be a woman. I don't care what that's about. But the fact of the matter is, one guy right now is charged with putting that train, slowing that train down from accelerating at 55, moving towards 60, and trying to slow that thing down to 45. And if you look at the visual there, Superman's got a couple of guns on him, okay? Big arms. And Jay Powell's got a couple of guns on him too. How does he do this? I can raise short-term borrowing rates and make it where a business won't borrow a dime from anybody. And I can also raise the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage and make it that no one buys a house, nobody builds anything, no commercial construction, no resident. I can do this. Jay Powell, or whoever's in that position, has enough strength to take that locomotive that's at 60 miles an hour and accelerating and pick it up and turn it on its side and put it in the ditch. They know how to do it. And I just explained how you do it. And so he didn't want to do that. That's called a hard landing. That's called a huge recession. And so that is where we're at today. If you wonder why there's a lot of uncertainty out there, everybody knows that prices are going through the roof. Everybody now is aware that they have to raise interest rates to get the job done. And the only thing people don't know is, can he keep it on the track or will he throw it in the ditch? Because if he throws it in the ditch, we'll have a big recession, and then the 30-year fixed rate mortgage will be 1.75%. And that's exactly what I just said, 1.75%. I remember in 2018 when mortgage rates were going up, and I was mentioning to a group somewhere that's like, next time we have a recession, I bet the 30-year fixed rate will go to 2%. Well, it didn't have to go to 2. It stopped at 2.75. It could have gone to 2 easy. But they stopped at 2.75 because they didn't need to go any lower. And they know, the Federal Reserve knows how to make the 30-year fixed rate mortgage go to 2.75, and they know how to make it go to 1.75, and they know actually how to lower it down to a half, probably. They won't lower it to 0. That's been done before. Google it if you like. Denmark, 30-year fixed rate mortgage, negative interest rate. You could buy a house in Denmark and the bank would pay you an interest payment on your mortgage. So people, here's the current buzzword, pivot. The Fed's going to pivot. We know that's going to happen. In fact, they're probably going to do it before the midterm election because the Fed never does dirty work during the election. That's a total myth. That is like completely uninformed, wrong information. They do dirty work during every election period. They could care less about a presidential election. The Fed's going to pivot. After the first of the year, they're going to lower rates again, and the market went up 1,200 points. Jay Powell, twice a year, as chairman of the Fed, has to go to Congress and testify before the House and the Senate. Some of you know me well enough to know that I have a weird personality. I can't sing and I can't dance and I can't keep a beat, like this thing. After the third iteration, my wife says, Mark, stop. It's like, you're off, all right? But what I do like to do is make spreadsheets and read Federal Reserve board meetings and research and the footnotes in those things. I really like that kind of stuff. I spent 5 hours listening to Jay Powell testimony to the Senate Banking Committee and the House Financial Services Committee in June because that guy will tell you what he's going to do, and he does it. And all of this stuff about pivoting is fairy tales. That guy has never said anything about pivoting, period. I want you to know exactly what he did say. So picture yourself. You're Jay Powell, and you're in the Senate, And all these politicians want to make their points. I fast forwarded through all the political gobbledygook, didn't listen to a word of that. There's no content there. But so what's happening is everybody is saying, well, Mr. Powell, can you lower the price of gasoline with interest rates? No. Mr. Powell, can you unlock the supply chain issues due to COVID in China with interest rates? No. Mr. Powell, can you deal with food inflation because of what's going on in Ukraine with interest rates? No. After taking a lot of that, these are all quotes. I was just taking notes like a schoolboy. After that, he goes, we have the tools we need and the resolve it takes to restore price stability. Interest rate increases can, quote, moderate demand. Now the question is, what does that mean? See, that's kind of what they call a nuanced answer. Whenever I hear the phrase nuanced answer, I'm from Kansas. We call that lying, okay? What does moderate demand mean? How do you moderate demand? When Americans got $4 trillion in their checkbook. You moderate demand by throwing people out of work. You moderate demand by having a lot of layoffs. And he wants that consumer, it's PCE, personal consumption expenditures. It's not the CPI, just what he wants to get down to 2% is the PCE, core PCE, without oil, without food, 5 minutes, okay. And then the other thing we've got that I want to say, and then I want to talk about this migration stuff for a minute, is that they said, well, aren't you worried about the people that are going to lose their job? And the bottom quote, and by the way, I've given the chamber permission to distribute this to attendees. The other risk is we fail to restore price stability and allow high inflation to continue because it hurts people in the lower income spectrum more than anybody else. We can't fail on that test, and we need to get inflation back to 2%. That's what he's told people. He hasn't said a word about we're going to pivot at the end of the year or anything else. All right, I'm going to skip home price appreciation. We can talk about that in the Q&A or whatever else you want to talk about. I want to talk about migration for a minute. And the bottom line is, you've all heard of ESG investing. I bet none of you have heard of SPA investing, because I totally made it up. It's a SPA quotient for real estate investment. And what that means is, if you've got a positive SPA quotient in your community, I want to invest with you. And if you don't, I don't want to invest with you. And the S is for safety of the residents living in the area. Is there a positive urban vibe? Is it fun to live in the town? The P is for protection of businesses that are located in the area. And the A is a positive local attitude toward employers. There are places in this country that have a positive SPA quotient. This is where people want to go. I talked to investors from all over the world, up in Dallas several times. Just a couple of weeks ago, a whole bunch of people from Canada, Israel, and I forgot what other, England too. And they'll ask me, is there any place other than Texas? And here's your answer. These are the places that people want to move to. This is where jobs are going to be created. This is where wealth is going to transfer to. And this is where population is going to come. And where's it going to come out of? Is this list of cities ranked by the National Retailer Federation, ranked on organized retail crime. And you can't see that from where you're at probably, but you can see it if you want with a copy of it. These are the cities in America that are exporting jobs as fast as you can say it. 1.9 million people have moved out of the New York metropolitan, NYC metro area in the last decade. 1.9 million have left. Chicago's metro area over the last decade, 1.6 million have left. The Bay Area, first half of that decade, from 2011 to 2021, they had positive migration. The last 5 years, they've been coming out of there too. They've lost about 600,000 jobs. This is what's going to happen and continue to happen. I've documented it. It's not just my own personal opinion. Prologis there, that's the CEO of Prologis, the biggest industrial REIT in America. He got mugged on the way to work and wrote an open letter to the mayor saying you got to do something. Citadel is moving their headquarters from Miami to Miami from Chicago. Workers commuting into Philly aren't coming back. What does that mean for the city? Portland, San Francisco mayor. Why am I documenting that? because I don't do opinion surveys or any of that. This isn't a Fox News opinion piece or MSNBC or any other propaganda organization like Russia Today or Al Jazeera. This is just facts. This is what's happening. This is why people are moving to Austin and Dallas and Fort Worth and San Antonio, and they're going to keep moving here until these cities get a positive urban vibe again. And what people don't get is it takes hard work by your government officials. Who does that? That would be your governor, your county judge, and your mayor, and your city council. It takes hard work to keep a positive urban vibe anywhere in America, and you have to work at it. And some of these places that have lost it, it can take a decade before, or more, before it's fun to live there again. That's why I'm bullish, and let me finish with that one. This is from the Texas State Data Center. It's their population projection for 2030. They're saying there'll be over 3 million people in Austin by 2030. That was done about 8 years ago. My guess is that number is going to be even bigger because that number was created way before this big urban migration that we're seeing right now. So thanks a lot for your kind attention. I'm looking forward to the other speakers. Talk to you later.
Please welcome back to the stage, Fred Heldenfels.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Dotzer, for joining us today and sharing your insight and really holding back on your opinions. We're going to have the pleasure of having Dr. Dotzer back with us on the stage later as part of our panel. But I'm very excited to welcome our next speaker. Many things are impacting our state's economy, so we're pleased to have Glenn Hagar, the Texas Comptroller, provide us with his outlook for the upcoming year. Glenn was elected as the 36th Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts in November 2014. I think he was about 19 at the time. He is our chief financial officer for our state, the state's treasurer, check writer, tax collector, procurement officer, and revenue estimator. Before he was elected Texas Comptroller, Hagar served in the Texas House of Representatives and the Texas Senate. He is a 1993 graduate of the Texas A&M University, and he may have the most graduate degrees of any statewide elected official. He has a Master of Arts and a law degree from St. Mary's University and a Master of Law from the University of Arkansas. Let's welcome Comptroller Glenn Hagar to the stage.
Wow, I touched that, sorry. Sorry, I walked in a little late, so I don't have a lapel, and I do not like to stand behind one of these podiums in any shape, form, or fashion. So those of you that were listening earlier, being elected, this is part of that gobbledygook, so we can fast forward here in a few minutes and skip to the end. No, I'm teasing, Doctor, but the fact is, let me tell you a little bit about kind of where we see the economy at, where we think the economy is going. I was giving a speech earlier today, and one of the points that I have made many times over and over, that in my role as a CFO, as a state controller here in the state of Texas, that it has been nothing short of remarkable watching the last 18 months here in the state of Texas. You know, if we go back just kind of real quick to that time period, which is hard for most of us to even recall or remember in any shape, form, or fashion, when COVID hit, and all of a sudden, you know, I was getting phone calls, everybody was getting calls, businesses were shut down, my agency went to teleworking, all these companies went to telework, businesses didn't know how they were going to continue to finance their operations, pay their employees, and I've told a story many different times because I was getting asked by legislators and people, where do you think we're at, where are we going, and I recall very quickly early on that I was on a conference call with the other 49 treasurers, and some of you have heard me say this, but I think it really kind of defines Texas and where we were at that moment and kind of where we've been in the last 2.5 years. Is very early on, I was on a conference call with the other 49 treasurers around the nation. I was in Katy, where we call home. My number two, my deputy, Lisa Craven, that's worked for me for a very long time, she was on the conference call as well, and at one point she texted me and said, I'm not saying a word. Now, you know, when you get messages from people and you look at it and it's so many words, but you know that there's actually more words than what they wrote. You know them well enough that you can fill in the blanks to the other words that they were including. And the other words were, I'm not saying a word because the panic and the concern in the voices of the people who are on this call, we're not in that spot. I mean, so many states didn't literally know how they were going to cash flow. And so it really kind of crystallized in my mind. In talking to the legislature and talking to the public, one of the things that I think is so critical for us, you know, we have a lot of responsibilities in our agency and our role, and the legislature has given me more responsibilities over this course of the last couple of years that we're working on. But one of those that I take front and center, that I try to focus on, is what's going on in the 254 counties across the state, what's going on in the 12 economic regions, and how does that multiply back up to, in totality, to the 9th largest economy in the world, who, oh, by the way, every morning when we wake up, it's hard to imagine, and we know this here in Austin, Travis County, Central Texas area, other parts of the state, every morning when we wake up, there's another 1,000 people that call Texas home every single day. I mean, every day. And why do people move here? They move here for an economic opportunity. That's what they move here for. And so at that point in time, many other states, some of the ones, the cities up on the list, the states that you were seeing just a minute ago, those states don't have that opportunity. And so therefore, I try to always talk about managing expectations of where the economy's at, where we think it's going. And I emphasize that word think, because no one truly knows, especially when the 9th largest economy in the world is very intertwined and tied to the rest of the globe, being that we are the major exporting state out of this nation at almost 20%. So we're very tied to that. And things and forces around the world impacts what are the horizon, the clouds or the sunshine that's on the horizon of the state today, tomorrow, next month, the next year, and on the horizon in the next few years. But kind of going back to that, it really crystallized that conversation of managing expectations, as though while I didn't know where the economy was going, but people wanted me to give them an answer as though we knew exactly what was going to happen in the next few months, I could at least calm people down and say, look, Texas entered into this in a very strong foundation. We're in a much stronger foundation than many other states, many other countries. And while we don't know exactly what's going to happen, we can take a deep breath, because we know it's going to be okay, and a couple months of data will help us figure it out. Well, fast forward, my team, gave a projection. We were wrong, in part because Texas all of a sudden started outgrowing it to some degree. It wasn't as deep, it wasn't as wide, federal infusion of money, all these different forces that came to be. And then over the course of the last couple of months, actually the last 18 months, has been nothing short of pure unbelievable. I'll give you one number to just really crystallize, and I've said this number over and over again. When I was giving the legislature and the public a revised revenue estimate this summer, which was substantially more from a cash carryover balance, we have a 2-year budget, which most of you know. Our state budget ends at August of next year. The legislature's coming into session in January. They work on a new 2-year budget. That budget doesn't start until September 1 of next year and goes for the next 2 years. So we were given a revision this summer. I was trying to figure out how I was going to message that, oh, by the way, the $12 billion cash surplus that I was telling Representative Howard and her colleagues, that I told them last fall, I was moving it to $27 billion. Oops, just a small rounding error. So I was trying to figure out, how do I message? But I had been saying the economy had continued to outperform our expectations. The revenues in the Treasury had continued to outperform. So I had been messaging that month after month after month, but I had never told anybody the totality. We were going from 14 to 27 billion. Now, one of the numbers that I'm about to tell you that I think really puts that in perspective, I was looking back over the charts and data, some of the numbers. I enjoy that too, looking at spreadsheets. I don't think I could read all the Fed footnotes, okay? That's too much for nerd Glenn Hager. But in looking back over total tax revenues in the last 30 years in Texas, one thing stuck out, that there's only 3 times that we had a double-digit increase in total tax collections from this year compared to the prior year. Only 3 times, and it was between 10 to 13%. And you go, okay, well, why does that stick out? Well, it sticks out because the number I was going to release to them this summer which ultimately, when we concluded the books at the end of August and started September 1, we had another double-digit increase last year compared to the year before. But that double digit was not 10 to 13, it was actually 25%. I mean, just absolutely staggering numbers that have come into the Treasury. And so I had several meetings today. One of them was, what do you think about this concept of money and dollars that we could use for a one-time expenditure in Texas? And I talk a lot about infrastructure funding because I firmly believe that pays long-term dividends, whether it's road infrastructure, water infrastructure, our grid system infrastructure, or one that the legislature gave me last session is high-speed internet broadband connectivity. Most of you would not have an idea if I asked you a number of the percent of people in the state of Texas, the percent of the total population of about 30 million people in this state that do not have reliable high-speed internet in and at their home, who want the connectivity, are willing to pay the connectivity. And it's not an issue of affordability. It's not an issue that they have it, but it's not as fast as they want it. No, the issue is it's not available. It does not exist. Actually, that doesn't exist for 7 million people in this state, which is roughly 23% of the entire state's population. And that doesn't even get to the issue of whether it's to the level you want it to be or you can afford it. And so we're charged with trying to connect the state of Texas and work with businesses to incentivize that connectivity to the federal money that's coming down to the state of Texas, which is an exciting opportunity because we have talked about connecting the state for a long time, and COVID really pushed Texas to know that it's not just about streaming something, that phone that's in your pocket or the computer, that it's a little about entertainment. No, it's literally about people doing their jobs. It's about businesses running their operation. It's about kids having access to education. It's about healthcare, telecommunication with your doctor or your physician or your nurse. And so therefore, there's all these things that are so critical, and I'm excited of the opportunity to do that. But as we're going into next session, I'm working on the revenue estimate with my team. I waited until after last Tuesday. I wonder why. We're all a little distracted. So right after the election, I was in Austin. We were having our first meeting on the numbers. I've had more meetings. I had another one yesterday as we're refining, landing down to what we're going to tell the legislature. And let me just say, if you take nothing else from what Glenn Hager said, come the day before next legislative session, one word that'll stick out, wow. Wow. The amount of money that they have at their disposal to figure out. I was telling somebody earlier today, I said, I've been in the legislative process for way too long. That's where I got all this gray hair. I've been there in times when we had enough. I've been there in times where we had no money. I've been there twice when we didn't have any money. And it's a lot easier when we don't have any money because you know what the answer is? No. Dad, I want, no. No. No can't exist this time. So now the priorities are, what do we do with those dollars? How do we do with those dollars? Because the fact is, it's not going to be $27 billion that is the cash carryover balance that I'm going to project in January. And you're saying, well, what's the number? I'm not telling you. You got to wait until the day before session. In part because even though I landed on a number yesterday, I feel comfortable with the projections we're giving. You know what? I'll tell you a quick story. So I've got a 17-year-old daughter. I've got a 14-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. There was 5 years ago plus, those of you that were watching from afar, but I got to live it in Katy, Texas. There west of Houston, we had a thing called Hurricane Harvey. We back up to a pipeline and a creek behind us, and behind our house, the creek flowed into a roaring river. There was water everywhere. The kids were looking out the window and going, oh my gosh. And I said, you see that? That's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Well, then fast forward, we had a thing called COVID. My kids were talking about it. I said, oh, it's a once-in-a-lifetime event. We were sitting at home in April of 2 years ago. My phone was blowing up. I was having lunch with my kids. My kids were at home from school, and my kids go, what's going on? And I said, oil today is trading at a negative number. And they go, I don't understand. And I said, well, the contracts are coming to come due. And in fact, There's nowhere to go with it right now, so the market says, and so therefore I have to pay you to buy the contract from me. And they go, what? And so my oldest daughter at one time, she asked me, she said, Dad, what is it trading at now? And I think I said -17, and she just looked at me and went like this. And I went, oh, that meant mind blow in teenage talk. So the kids kept asking, and I explained how that's a once-in-a-lifetime event. And so then fast forward, last winter, we had Winter Storm Uri. As we all know, so many of us went dark, people went cold. It was a devastating few days for Texas. We woke up, we had no electricity as well. My son, who was a few weeks short of being 13 at the time, we were taking him to a friend's house. They were going over to a friend. Our friend, he does emergency management for an oil and gas company. He's Mr. Prepared. He has a natural gas generator. We don't have a natural gas generator. That's why we had no electricity. And my son said, Dad, why don't we have a natural gas generator? And I said, well, you know, Joan, I grew up on a farm. I mean, that's one more thing I got to keep up with. There's a lot of stuff to keep up around here. And oh, by the way, this was a once-in-a-lifetime event. Well, you know, when people look at you and you say something and they look at you and though you think, I'm not sure what they're going to say, but it's going to be something cute to what I just said. It's going to be a pretty good response. I saw that twinkle, that look in his eyes. And my son said, Dad, he must have been remembering oil trading negatively, must have been thinking about COVID. He must have been thinking about the hurricane that turned the Roaring River, probably a couple other events I've said about. And my son looked at me and he said, Dad, how many once-in-a-lifetime events do I have to live through? So I learned that day, one, not use that phrase as much with my kids. But number two, it really drove home the point, we've been through a lot of stuff in the last few years. And we hadn't even got to a Russian invasion of Ukraine, a whole lot of different things, some of the points you made. There's been a lot. And so in part, I'm not telling you a number, you know, because there might be another one of what Glenn defines as a once-in-a-lifetime event between now and the end of the year. So my number might change by then, the economic outlook. But regardless, the point is this. When we come into next legislative session is going to be a pretty remarkable opportunity for the legislature to do something that we will never have an opportunity again in Texas history. We will never again have an annual tax total collection compared to the prior year of 25%. We will not still have some federal money that can be utilized instead of state money for general revenue. So it is going to be a remarkable opportunity because the word that they can't use no. And now they have to prioritize what are those things that we can do in Texas to hopefully make life a little bit better that we have not been tending to. And that mix is going to be a lot of things in the bucket. Just to make a point, and then I'll stop because I assume I'm about out of time. If the legislative process is like a funnel, we got 5 minutes? Oh, I can talk forever. No, I'm kidding. I am a former state senator, and guess what? We can talk a lot. We have our own microphones. Wow. But one of the things about a legislative process, as you all know and you're so astute, is that the legislative process is like a funnel. And the funnel at the top is really big. And the funnel at the bottom is small. And kind of like an hourglass, you don't just turn it over and watch the sands come down from one side to the next. Actually, at some point, you have to turn it back over, and it doesn't all go through. And so therefore, that 140 days is a timeline and a process that constricts it even more. And so therefore, as I was doing a podcast earlier, an interview on water infrastructure issues, and asked me if the legislature was going to take that up because I just traveled the state this last fall talking about water infrastructure because that's one thing, as we all know here in Central Texas and around the state, that we have to have. Now, when I picked that subject last fall, I didn't know we were going to have a drought. I didn't know that no matter where you drove across the state, it was going to be brown. I didn't know that wherever you traveled, most of the lakes were going to be substantially lower than where they were before, but it was a good time to remind people. Now, the fact is, we all get up, we turn on the water, we expect it to come on, but if we're growing 1,000 people a day in business opportunities that are coming to Texas, we're going to have that infrastructure. So, you know, I think it's going to be a remarkable challenge for the legislature next session, even though it's amazing. Glenn Hager has said a couple of times in several speeches, I started about a month ago, again, to manage expectations. I had given the first time in a speech here about last month, and I said, you know, this is going to be the 5th revenue estimate that I've worked on, assuming the election turns out. So yes, it did. So now I'm in my fifth officially that not only do we work on, but we're going to have to announce. And actually, I am looking less forward in part to talking about this revenue estimate than any one that I've ever done before. And you would go, well, why is that, Glenn? I mean, you're going to show up like St. Nick. I mean, St. Nick needs like a whole group of U-Haul vehicles to bring all the money loads that you're going to tell the legislature that y'all have to work on. What is the problem? Well, the problem is some of what you've heard already, and we all experience this, and we have been for quite some time. And it was shown very clear when I told my staff, February of last year, I sent them the Dallas Fed report, and I said, I want you to look at the answers that people provided in the questions, because I've never seen one so consistent. And the consistency was every business, I think it was the manufacturing report, said they had concerns about labor shortage, inflation, and supply chains. Now, I know none of you have heard those words. Every business has that issue, and we continue to have that issue, and will continue probably for a while. And so as the global economy, some of the issues that were mentioned earlier, is causing a national and a global slowdown. So the irony is, I am showing up in January to tell the legislature, here's the bucket of money that is a cash carryover balance you will have to work with for the next 2 years. But oh, by the way, Glenn Hager's saying that we are having some type of a mild recession in Texas. Now, with that being said, don't expect that it will be a drastic reduction in revenues for the next 2 years. But it is kind of, you got to admit, ironic that the biggest record surplus we have ever had in Texas history comes at a time that I also have to bear the bad news to manage expectations that don't think Christmas will be like this again. You won't come back to another legislative session and ever have this again. You will not have it. It will be a once in a lifetime. And so I'm trying to manage that expectation that, yes, I'm looking less forward in part because I'm saying that the economy is slowing down. And yes, Texas is going, in my opinion, without a doubt, is going to outperform the national average. We will outperform many other states as we have. We will outperform many other countries. But with that said, we are not immune to the clouds on the horizon of the national and the global economy. But nobody knows how deep, how wide, how long. We are forecasting it's not very deep. It's not very wide for Texas. But with that being said, I think. And I say that, stress that word, because I'm giving an estimate to a legislature, to the state, that, oh, by the way, I say it in January. It doesn't start until September of next year, and it runs for 2 years after that. I remember the very first time, and I will stop on this because I know we have a panel discussion. I remember I used to always ask the question, is there anyone in this room with 100% accuracy, 100%, that can tell me how much, with 100% certainty, how much will come into your personal household? I'm not asking about your business. I'm not talking about a charity, a nonprofit, whoever you work in or manage. I want to know your personal household, because that is most personal and detailed to you, and you can control that a little bit more. Do you have 100% certainty of how much money will come in your personal household starting in 9 months and ending 2 years later? I loved asking that question. You know why? Because I never got any hands. And then one day I was at an event, a chamber event, in a city just north of here, Killeen, Texas. You go, well, why did that change that day, Glenn? Well, because right across the street there's a place called Fort Hood. A gentleman in the audience, he raised his hand. I looked at him and I went, damn, I shouldn't have asked that question today. Do you know why? Because he looked like he was retired. He looked like he had worked across the street at Fort Hood. He looked like he was on a certainty of a government pension. He raised his hand and I said, let me guess, U.S. Army, retired, fixed pension. He goes, yep, I can tell you to the penny. I said, okay, other than him, anybody else? So I make that point in joking in part because it is very hard to forecast a state that's this big, this diverse, for that long period of time. So that's the reason I stress that word think. But we do know that it seems as though there will be a downturn in the economy, but I will tell you, the amount of businesses that want to continue to move here, the people that want to move here, you saw the chart of those that people are moving from. They're moving to a state like this. So long as y'all make wise decisions next session, hopefully we will continue to take advantage of what Texas is, Texas will become, and use the opportunity of Glenn Hager bringing all those loads of money next year, and know that it's probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So with that, I'll stop. Thank y'all for letting me be here. Thank you for what you do to engage in the state of Texas. I remember one of y'all's colleagues a little while back last year had made the point, said Glenn Hager, he's the type of CFO that I love. He, under-promises and over-performs. And I thought, does he really think I'm in charge of the economy? I like that a lot. So I was thinking, how do I respond to that? I'd never had somebody say it that way, like I really control the 9th largest economy in the world. I just get to report the data and the facts and the numbers. And so I got up and I made the point, and I've actually used this a lot, and this is where I'm going, is that, while I would love to say that I could take credit for where Texas has been, the fact is I just get to report the facts. And the reason it's been where we've been is because companies and people like yourself wake up and every single day make Texas the Texas that we love to call home. And that's why in the short time I've been in my role, we've moved from the 12th largest economy to the 11th, to the 10th, and now the 9th. And in the next few years, I got confidence we will become the 8th largest economy in the world, and it's because of people like you that make Texas the place we love to call home. So thank y'all, and good to be with you today.
Please welcome John Garrett, CEO and founder of Community Impact.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is John Garrett, and my wife and I started Community Impact back in 2005. We're now the largest local news organization in Texas. We're all over Houston, from the Woodlands down to Clear Lake City, even out to Glenn Hager's Katy. We're up in Dallas and Collin County, all the way over to Tarrant County, and now creeping into Dallas County. And we're also down in San Antonio, but we started right here in Austin, and we cover Austin from Hayes County all the way up to Williamson County. And I was asked to moderate this event, and I want to tell you that there are many people in this room that I'm so grateful for helping Community Impact grow, including the Austin Chamber, who's been a great partner for us as we've grown over the years, and I want to say thank you. And so it was my privilege to serve as a moderator for this event, and to be frank with all of you, I am also a business owner. I've got 250 employees, and I'm kind of freaked out right now. I don't know about you guys, but going through what we've gone through, all the once-in-a-lifetime events we've been through, it's been very confusing how to navigate, how to staff your teams, how to fund your business, how to talk to your customers. It's really confusing. So I'm here curious, like many of you are, and I hope that I lead this panel well, and I hope that each of you, regardless of what you do or who you work for or who you want to work for, we are hiring, we hope you all leave here with some advice or maybe a different perspective on maybe than you thought you'd have when you came. So, as my favorite podcast Community Impact breakdown, the host who's here today, Olivia Aldridge, likes to say on the podcast, let's get to it. Is that right, Olivia? Sort of. Let's get into it. All right, so here we go. Let's get into it, and I want to introduce, first of all, I'd like to ask Dr. Dotzer to come back up on stage to join us up here. Joining Dr. Dotzer is also Sharice Bodish, and is a 30-year economic development veteran. She has worked in every aspect of the industry. She's the Senior Vice President of Economic Development with the Austin Chamber, and through the Regional Economic Development Initiative Opportunity Austin, she also leads the team dedicated to the recruitment of these new corporate citizens that we call neighbors now, and also the expansion of local industry base for the 5-county greater Austin region. Also, lastly, joining us on the panel is Thomas Schutte, a super smart person I've gotten to know a little bit recently. He's the Senior Vice President of Investment Grade Credit Research Analyst for PIMCO, one of our sponsors today. And before joining PIMCO in 2021, he was co-head of the Investment Research and Strategy Department at Girton Municipal Bond Management, a PIMCO company. And before that, he was the lead analyst at Moody's Investor Service, where he analyzed a broad range of municipal sectors nationwide and participated in developing the firm's rating methodologies. Please join me in welcoming our amazing panel today to help us sort through all of these things we're trying to sort through. Now, I'd like to start, first of all, I just have to, with Dr. Dotzer, after that presentation you just gave. I'm curious, what advice would you give our state CFO when he says, hey, I've got all this money, let's go spend it? That's kind of what I heard. I'm just curious from your standpoint, what advice would you give him as he approaches this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with all this cash?
Let's see if my mic's on. How we doing? Can you hear me in the back? Okay, great. Yeah, that would be easy. It would be to provide the services that will fund future growth in the state that's going to keep coming. We need the infrastructure. We need to plan for a state that is way bigger than it is now and keep that quality of life that we've enjoyed over the decades.
That's great. You know, I know there's a lot of people within the infrastructure community that are here today. And Dr. Schutte, visiting with you a little bit, I'd like for you, if you don't mind, share a little bit. You know, one of the things you study is the health of local municipalities and local government entities. You mind sharing with the group here how healthy are the balance sheets of the local municipal entities in the different groups you study?
Sure. Not a doctor, so can't claim that title. So, I mean, the story really follows a lot of what the comptroller said. So I think states and locals nationwide, you know, early during the pandemic started making cuts, were very worried about what was happening, and then have been amazed at the kind of inflows of tax revenue beyond the money they've gotten from the federal government. So a lot of states and locals get to tell the same story right now of, you know, rainy day funds that are flush, that are well beyond what they'd expected, multiple years of double-digit revenue growth. I think Texas is an outlier to the positive beyond even the envy of, you know, other states, but California posted a $40 billion surplus. You had all sorts of states right now kind of recording record kind of tax collections, rainy day funds, et cetera. So I think when we enter this period of uncertainty right now, one of the real strengths is that the state and a lot of the local governments around here are sitting on a lot of dry powder for whether it's infrastructure spending or replacing revenues if they do start to see tax collection slides. So I mean, Austin, Katy, Leander, Cedar Park, a lot of these cities are sitting on somewhere between 30 to 50% reserve levels, which means they could see 30 to 50% of their revenues fall away, not make any expenditure cuts, and still provide the same level of service. So I mean, that's really impressive from where I sit and thinking about how state and local governments are positioned for this period where you kind of don't know how things are going to perform.
Let's dig a little deeper into that on the infrastructure side. So you're talking about these city governments that have a lot of cash. They're ready for, if there is a dip, a recession, they're ready for that based on their balance sheets. They also have borrowing capacity. You could speak to that if you like. But this is all before we're even talking about any of the infrastructure money coming from the federal government. Isn't that right?
That's totally right. You know, when you look across kind of the region, a lot of the local governments here in the state as well have borrowed a decent amount of money in past years, but it's really been kept in pace with population growth, tax-based growth, all the other metrics you look at. So from a balance sheet perspective, places have the capacity to borrow. And I found it interesting. I was looking at data before I came in today. Through mid-year, debt issuance from Texas and that state and locals, according to the bond buyer, was actually down 7% year over year. So I think what you're seeing is a lot of cash that's in here. You're using that for kind of pay-go financing and not borrowing, which leaves you capacity if you do need to issue debt in coming years. But yeah, you know, a lot of the infrastructure money, and Comptroller Hager speaks to it better than I, and a lot of the local officials in the audience, I'm sure. But what we're hearing is that it's not really flowing through yet, and this might be a 10 to 12 year process of this money actually getting put to work. So, you know, really, again, to echo the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, you've got really good rainy day funds, a solid trend of revenue collections, and you're about to get a big slug of money still following through on the infrastructure bill that you've got time to kind of make wise decisions on.
All right, so I'm just curious, if you're in this room and any of your business deals with city or county or infrastructure, would you raise your hand just so we could get kind of a perspective of that? Okay, you guys are looking good for the next couple of years, maybe next 10 years. For the rest of you, I'm just curious, you're thinking about like what could you do to maybe get into some of, some municipal work or some infrastructure work. I think a big part of what we need to see as an economy, though, the diversity of a growing economy is more jobs. And I want to ask Charisse, Charisse, you've been doing this a long time, and you're probably one of the best people that any of us in the room can talk to about economic development. You had a once in a lifetime year last year, right? In terms of economic development. I'm just curious, what are you seeing right now? It's been an interesting year. What are you seeing right now that's maybe different from what you saw last year in economic development for the region?
So Comptroller, thank you very much for giving us that once in a lifetime that we can play off of for this entire panel. So it's interesting, you mentioned once in a lifetime, because this room is very fortunate. For us to be in Texas and us to be in the Austin region, we are the fortunate ones. I can tell you that right now. So once in a lifetime, Army Futures Command, man alive, that was a once in a lifetime deal for us to be able to recruit that. Apple, big expansion, not saying it's HQ2, is Steve in the room? Not saying that, but it's a big office expansion outside of their corporate headquarters, once in a lifetime deal. Tesla, oh my gosh, once in a lifetime deal during COVID. That deal was done virtually for the most part during COVID. Samsung, once in a lifetime. Who would have ever thought Samsung with all these multiple, and thank you to the Comptroller for all the work on the Chapter 313s on that. Once in a lifetime. We've had multiple once in a lifetimes in this region. And that's the thing that we're seeing, is that it used to be if we had a deal that came in, whether it was office or manufacturing, and it was 50,000 square feet, and for those of you not in real estate, the deals we're seeing now are in the millions. They are mega deals. They are in the billions of dollars worth of capital investment. It is amazing the flow of projects that we are currently working and the size of those projects. Those once in a lifetime deals have actually set the platform for the diversity that we're experiencing. So when you look at Army Futures and you look at Samsung and you look at Tesla, there's a lot of supply chain associated with that. And that's actually what's going to help us. I know whether it's recession, downturn, a little blip, whatever we want to call it, I think it's imminent. Everybody's looking at those numbers. And how do we weather that? And you know what? We did good in 2008. We were one of the last ones in, first ones out. And because of what this room has done and the diversification that we've put into place, I think that's going to help us.
So Dr. Dotzer, you said something that I think was interesting to me about the increase of the population going to continue. And I think your point was that all the charts we saw 5 years ago about how the population was going to increase, those are old charts and we should raise them. Is that right? Do I have that right? Like it's going to be even more?
Yeah.
Well, before you go there, I have to ask you a question that's really important to me. Yeah, and I want to get this on the record. You said people are moving from places that aren't very fun, and I would like for you to name a few of those places that are not very fun.
I don't need to. You know what they are. Everybody does. It's no secret. I did think of the metaphor that you used, Glenn, about the funnel being wide at the top. That's also appropriate to Texas in terms of population growth, because there's just this huge global move away from China with jobs and wealth that is new. And so you've got a global funnel of wealth and jobs that are moving back to the United States as quickly as they can. And then that's the big funnel. And then you get down to another funnel, and once you make the decision to move back to the United States, hello, still here? Good. There's another funnel, and then that's those 6 states. So that's what's so kind of unbelievable about it, or astronomical, or whatever word you want to use about it. I think that's what's happening here. This is so different. After having jobs move to India and move to Mexico and move to China for the last 25 years, stuff is coming back in again. And then there's lots of places in America used to move to that don't want to move there any longer. And so I think that would be my humble explanation of why you're seeing this super normal behavior happening here. And I did think of one thing in terms of where we could put money.
Yes, go ahead.
A&M really needs some help buying out their football coach, okay? If you have a few extra bucks, just, I know it
waiting on
might
the
not
whoops.
happen.
Are there any-
Santa
are there any-
doesn't
Are
always
there any
deliver.
whoops in the room?
I was going to say Donna Howard's over here.
Okay.
Writing it down
They're all
over.
staying silent, yes. I have a question that's related to this workforce question. The one things I don't fully understand, I've talked to a lot of builders and developers here in Austin, and they are seeing a slowdown, a significant slowdown. I've heard numbers 50% less. And so one question I have for you to start us, Dr. Dotzer, if you could build the foundation for us. The Fed is doing this interest rate. It feels punitive to the real estate community. And I'm just curious, how does that really flow down to slowing down demand elsewhere? And then to follow up with that, Sharice, if you don't mind sharing what you're hearing from large companies thinking about moving in here and what that might mean for housing here locally. So Dr. Dotzer, can you start there?
So if the question is it punitive to real estate? The answer is yes. By definition, anybody in the real estate business knows that you're the first one. I didn't get an opportunity to serve in the military, but I remember a long time ago reading about being on a patrol in Vietnam, and they have these people out in the jungle, and there's a point man at the very front of it, and the life expectancy of a point man in a firefight was like 3 minutes. And I speak to real estate audiences every week, and it's like the real estate industry is the first one to feel it. They are on the point. They're the most interest-sensitive industry in the country. So yeah, the good news, if you're in the real estate industry, you're the first one to go down, but you're also the first one to come back. And so right now, they're feeling the burden a lot, but they're not laying off a whole bunch of people yet either. It's interesting how the layoffs have been in the tech side of things, but that's how you slow things down. You slow down everything. And it's just that in normal circumstances, commercial and residential real estate are the first ones to feel it.
So it's not a strategic move that you go real estate first and then everything else falls behind that. It's more just because they're so interest dependent that they get hit the first. Is that
correct?
Right? Okay, that helps. Sharice, so what are you hearing from local business owners that are looking to move here, that are thinking about bringing jobs here? How does the real estate environment look for them, or are there other factors, that some of these companies are telling you that they're concerned about that they wouldn't move here?
The top things that every company we work with, at least up to this point, and some of this, may change over the next couple months, number one is talent, tightness of talent, getting talent, cost of talent, and I think we're going to have some talent available based on some of the most recent news. But the other thing is affordability, and that is across a lot of things. It's not just real estate, but I'm looking at Mark right here, Mark Ramser. At the end of the day, those interest rates, it's going to get folded in. And it's not just supply chain cost, it's not just the labor cost, it's that interest, it's got to be carried. All of that gets folded into every project. On the housing market, and I don't know if somebody's in the audience from the Austin Board of Realtors, but their September number is that we're at a median of $470,000, average price or median price for a home in the Austin region. And there is a cooling off. For the first time, we're seeing that we have, houses are on the market for about 45 days. Used to be that the houses were selling sight unseen. People were just closing on it to get a house. But now you've got interest rates. Are people going to be paying that higher interest rate to go buy that home? And how does that affect our multifamily? We do have a lot of housing market, a lot of housing stock that's being built. If anybody gets Capella newsletter, they do a great summary kind of outlining all the housing that's being built across the region. So yeah, I think some of this is going to play into how we can address our companies moving in. We've got more housing stock. more's on the market. That's going to start depressing some of that pricing, I feel like, my opinion. And on the talent side, you've got some companies that are announcing layoffs, and so there may be some talent availability that we can put into those new companies looking to come here.
That's great. You know who else has a great newsletter is Community Impact. You can find our newsletter
Oh,
at
yes.
communityimpact.com. And one of the things that we talk about in our newsletter a lot is education. Education is one of the, there's a lot of people actually in this room that have spent a lot of time and effort making sure that we have some of the best education options. Is a big part of our economic development needs for these companies coming here. And I know, Thomas, we talked a little bit about this, especially with the state CFO here. We could talk a little bit about the education funding issues that you're seeing. We're writing a lot about local districts having funding shortfalls. So just if you would talk to us a little bit about some of that concern about education funding as we kind of move into these next few years.
Sure, and I think this is really, again, something we see nationwide, so it's not purely a Texas issue, but as state coffers have filled, you've had the well kind of publicized teacher shortage, high burnout within K through 12. And I think someone had mentioned it earlier, but one of the things we've really seen within kind of the public sector data is that wage growth has really lagged the private sector. So I think only within the last quarter have we started to see public sector wage growth kind of outpace the private sector. But the public sector's really lagged in being able to go back to pre-pandemic employment levels. So long after the private sector had added all the jobs back that it had lost during the pandemic, I think the public sector was still down 3-4%. So really struggling to fill positions, and I think a lot of that really was K through 12. So now as state coffers are full, there's gonna be some really tough decisions, I think, on school funding formulas, on helping kind of capital building. And I think in Texas especially, you have so many suburban districts that are growing so fast, and we saw all the bond referendums throughout the state and the size of them. And I think a lot of that is just, again, representative of growth. And Texas has some interesting issues kind of facing it with the permanent school fund. I don't know how many of you are aware of that hitting or getting close to hitting its ceiling. And that's been a really, really amazing mechanism for school districts in the state to borrow at exceptionally low interest rates, borrowing probably akin to what the state's strongest geo-security is, so at a very low rate. Once you hit that cap, the IRS, I think, actually has to come in and move it. And so that takes time. I think the last time the state bumped into the cap, it took, it's off the top of my head, but 6 to 8 months, I want to say. I'm probably wrong on that. But that was like 08, 09, somewhere in that time frame. So school districts at that point have to borrow in their own capacity. They can't lean on the Texas Permanent School Fund as a kind of wrap of those bonds. So I think you're going to have, some tough capital decisions, tough funding decisions. I think the same labor shortages that we've all talked about in terms of kind of the business community and everything also hit the public sector. And as you have teacher demands and the need to fill positions there, this is, I think, going to be a really, really interesting legislative session for a lot of states beyond Texas dealing with and grappling with these same issues.
Yeah, on this employment thing, Dr. Dotzer, first of all, I want to ask from a business owner perspective, if you have some advice. You showed the chart of the $4 trillion that's now in accounts. What advice would you give business owners about how to manage their balance sheets right now with the uncertainty of the next few years?
Well, I think anytime you enter into a slowing period, it's just careful not to get too much leverage on your books. It's not a good time to have a whole lot of debt. I mean, most businesses have debt, but there's high levels of debt and there's lower levels of debt. So I think the prudent thing to do, whether it's a business or if you own a bunch of real estate too, it's good to not go into a recession with a lot of debt. You just have to plan for lower revenue, possibly, in a real estate context, lower rent per unit, and possibly more vacancy. And so you just have to be careful to keep your debt levels low enough that you can take a lower rent and a higher vacancy and not lose your property. And the same thing with a business too. Just be prepared for lower revenue and higher costs, and keep your debt at a moderate level.
So one of the things that's really confusing as a business owner too is this talent, what's going on in the talent world. We read, Twitter's laying off, Meta's laying off, all these people are laying off. Locally, our businesses are pretty strong. We're not feeling, the same kind of pressure, but after going through the pandemic and all this craziness, we're kind of wondering, like what are the other companies thinking? I'm just curious from you, Sharice, like what are you hearing from other businesses that are looking to the region? Should local business owners right now do whatever we can to, keep our talent and add on to maybe some of this talent that's being let go? What are you hearing from businesses moving here?
So I'll talk to businesses that are here already, and kind of what we're seeing and what's going on. We've talked with, I think, 120 companies so far this year. We've been out to California and met with some of our headquarters of companies, and it has been a really, really interesting conversation. And I'll say it's mostly on the office side of things that, you're seeing these layoffs, and a lot of them are on that office side. But what's interesting is that we've got companies that brought people back into their offices, and it's interesting that they did it, they knew that they were going to have a loss. So the ones, and I won't name names, some of you know who that is, and a lot in this room, when you brought them back, your employees back in, you started to see some that say, hey, I'm remote, I'm not coming back. But what's interesting is that maybe some of those employees weren't the most productive employees, and you've been able to absorb that, and now you've got new talent that's coming out that you can pick from some of these other companies. Some of the ones that are announcing are the ones that maybe aren't fully back into their offices. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic on what's going on with the going back to office and how that has affected who is actually laying off now. As far as being a local employer, yeah, I'd say you want to keep hold of your good talent. And what is it Churchill said? Never miss an opportunity to take advantage of a good crisis. and I think you see some companies, because it's been on the employee side, kind of, they've had all the cards, and it's now going back to the employer side. And we heard that in many of our meetings while we were in California, where the companies are like, hey, we need this pendulum to come back, where we can have our employees here, we can be collaborative, we can work together, and we can really come up with great new technologies, and we need to do that as a team. It's very difficult to do that on a Zoom or a Teams or whatever. So I think we've got an interesting couple of 12 months maybe ahead of us.
Interesting 12 months. It's fun to have to navigate these things as business leaders, but it's part of what our responsibility is now. I did have some people ask me some questions about crime and how it plays a role in economic development. I know this is a fun topic for the panel to talk about, but it came up in the the political discourse this election. I'm just curious. I'll start with you, Thomas, if you don't mind, because you do study cities and how they fund and what their budgets are like. What do you see cities looking at in terms of crime? What opportunities that they have to fight some of the crime issues that some of the cities are seeing?
Yeah, so I mean, we're lucky enough to get to talk to cities across the country on a pretty frequent basis. And so I'd say, at this point, no matter where you're at, if you're a relatively large city, whether fair or not, there's a perception that public safety is an issue. And I think mayors and councils are feeling that. And so what we've seen out of definitely FY23 budgets, but even what was being spent in FY22, is a pretty big ramp up in public safety spending. So I think it's absolutely an issue. I think there's places where I think the data make it out to be a little bit more of probably a perception issue as opposed to a reality issue. But I think, again, from our discussions with larger cities and even some of the bigger suburbs surrounding the kind of central core cities, it's very much a concern, and it's very much kind of front and center in terms of a policy issue that they're thinking about, not only from probably an economic development standpoint, but I would assume obviously a quality of life, citizen happiness, and just kind of voter outreach issue. So
how does this impact you, Sharice, as you navigate? You have companies that come in to look to move the region. Do they talk about public safety? Is it one of the things that they talk about and they want to hear more about?
It does play into our conversation. I can see some of my team members in the audience giving me like, what is she going to say?
What are you going to say? Tell us.
Yeah, I know.
Tell us what you don't want to say. Tell us all of it.
So it does play in the conversation. Some of them are moving from areas where their employees don't feel safe. Their employees don't feel safe walking to their cars. and they're coming from areas where crime is kind of going off the charts. Austin, the Austin area is perceived as still safe. We do have those reports from companies that we meet with here locally that we do have a growing issue, and that's something that we need to look at as a community on how do we address that and how do we go forward with that. But definitely it is part of a conversation when we're talking with these companies.
So Dr. Dotzer, I know it was one of your points as well on your slide I saw.
Yeah, it's really funny. Just a simple thing like raising the dollar amount of retail theft that you will prosecute, just raising that from like $600 to $900. And then all of a sudden you have, and then think about it, you got your daughter who's going to college, and she's a clerk at a Walgreens, and 15 people come in with shopping bags and just loot the place. You're not going to be able to hire a young person to do that, so you tell that young person, you just don't do anything. You don't do anything. And so what's sprung up is organized retail crime deal. Those 17 people that show up with the shopping bags and just take stuff, there's probably a Suburban right around the corner with somebody else that will pay $200 for those shopping bags that you got and then put them on Amazon and sell them. I just heard that this morning. They were talking about Target sales, and Target was talking about shrinkage as being a big deal to their bottom line. And so it's really interesting how just a small change like that can create an environment where it's what's going to happen is retailers just going to leave the downtown. It took forever to get retailers to come back to the urban center of cities all over America, and that simple change in raising that limit, I've just watched one after another. Walgreens closed. Walgreens in San Francisco, they're just closing every couple of months. And so it's a big deal. And don't take it for granted. We're in a great state here, but we can't take it for granted. You have to be diligent to keep a positive urban vibe because it doesn't want to be there by itself. There's reasons why it's there. And I think we're doing a great job in Texas, but we certainly don't want to take it for granted because you can lose the urban vibe in any city in this country if you're not diligent.
I mean, isn't it fascinating that we're talking about public safety? I think that's really fascinating that it came up to me so many times as I was talking about this panel. I just think that that's an interesting thing that as a room, we need to be paying really close attention to in these next few years. Last topic I want to kind of just address, and I'll start with you, Dr. Dotzer. I think you might have the best insight into this, maybe, I'm hoping.
Probably not.
Is if you are an employee right now, there might be, employers thinking about, the new way of keeping our employees fulfilled. But if you're in this room and you're an employee that's maybe thinking about making a job change, it's probably confusing for them as well because, as Sharice mentioned, it was such an employee market. Things are looking a little strange out there. What kind of advice do you give employees right now as they're navigating this environment, this crazy environment that we're all in right now?
My advice to every young person that comes out of Texas A&M that I have a chance to talk to or ask me questions about it, that sort of thing, is keep in mind why you're getting paid. You're getting paid to help somebody else solve a problem or create an opportunity, and that person that's paying you doesn't really want to be paying you a dime. They're doing it because they can't do it by themselves. And if you have that attitude going into a company, you're going to stand out like a superstar. If you have a vision of helping your boss succeed, that's what at Texas A&M, I wasn't the director of the real estate center, I was the director of research, and I told my staff, my job here is to make my boss look good. And everything we do to do that is how we define success. And I found that I became an integral part of the company. My boss didn't want to fire me. And so just keep in mind who you're working for and what your goal is. That's what the job market looks like. So find some place that you care about and then devote your attention to that. Be engaged. Don't be partially engaged. Don't be quiet quitting. Find some place you like and then put your heart and soul into it, so at the end of the day, you feel a sense of worth that you have accomplished something, you have a role in the future growth of society. And that'd be my answer.
Well, no one asked me, but I'll ask myself. One of the things that just as business leaders I want to share with you, one of the things I've learned recently through a company that studies this, is that we're going to be tempted as business leaders to, as we start getting more of those cards at the table, to like take them. And what the best world advice is don't do that. That employees are looking for fulfillment at work now. No longer are they looking for engagement. That's a big change, and that means they're looking for personal and professional growth. They're looking for how they're going to grow not only with their own finances, but also how they could grow professionally. They're looking for purpose, so thinking about what your purpose in the job is. And the data that I've seen says that the next 10 years, the employment rate is going to stay really tight. So my advice that no one asked for is let's make sure that we're continuing to focus on making our employees feel fulfilled at work. And I'm like 2 minutes ahead, so I'm going to end by asking you to thank our amazing panelists here for joining us. Thank you all very much. And I'd like to ask Laura Huffman, the CEO of the President and CEO of this Austin Chamber, to come and wrap it up.
Thank you. All right, well, okay, I'm not exactly sure what to feel. I feel that there is a world that is changing underneath our feet. We're living in a lot of first evers, and we're lucky to be in Texas, and we're super lucky to be in Central Texas is what I'm getting out of all of this. So I want to thank all of you. Comptroller Hager, thank you. I know how busy you are, especially this time of year. This is a group of men and women that are business leaders in Austin. It's important for us to understand how you're viewing the state economy, what's happening nationally. So I can't thank you enough for digging in with us today. I know we went a little bit long. Let me say this about the Chamber. It is our commitment to make sure that you get information like this as often as we can get it to you. So you get this in our transportation workshops, you get this in our economic forecasts, but we are here to make sure that you get what you need when you need it. And I also want to take an opportunity to recognize our volunteer leadership. Most of you serve on boards throughout Austin. Thank you for doing that. Business leaders are community leaders. There are a couple people that I want to recognize. First of all, I want to recognize our chair, Fred Heldenfels. Fred has heard from me probably way more often than he thought he would in the last year, and what's fun about this job is sometimes you get to know people and oftentimes you become friends, so thank you for that, Fred. I also want to introduce Ali Kata, our incoming chair. And then if you are currently on the board of directors for the Chamber, or if you are incoming to the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce, please stand up and let us recognize you. And to John's point, we all know we can't do this without remarkable staff. We've got that at the Chamber, and I really would like to have everyone that works for the Chamber stand up and please be recognized. All right, last thing I want to say is thank you for coming. If you are a member of the Chamber of Commerce, we appreciate your commitment to this organization. If you are not, well, now you know how cool it is. So you can fix that like probably this afternoon. So please do so. And thank you again to the panelists. Thanks for staying for this opportunity to hear about our federal, state, and local economy. And y'all have a great afternoon. Thank you.